If you see a beautiful woman standing alone with her back to you under weak light, leave. Because that warning is said to come before every story that follows. People whispered that the men who ignored it were later found lifeless, not torn, not dragged, with the place around them strangely calm and untouched. The ones who arrived after supposedly said it the same way every time. No signs of struggle, no theft, only a heaviness like the air had tightened. In these rumors, the first detail remembered is never her face, only her hair and the pale line of her neck drawing attention like a hook. They say the men approached on their own because nothing about her posture looked threatening, and because desire makes distance feel smaller than it is. Then the story always tightens. At the same point, the moment she turns, and the listener understands they were never being invited, only measured. After that turn, people say the fear is immediate and physical, like the throat reflexively closes, as if copying something that happened long ago. Eventually, a name settles in the telling, Luresa, drawn from lure, because she does not chase, she only waits for the approach. People argue about what she is, but the argument never changes her function, because the stories insist she exists to punish a specific kind of attention. The safest version says she formed from a woman who died by strangling after a violent assault, and the crime never reached daylight or judgment. They say the injustice did not leave a normal ghost, but a leftover moment, a single memory of pressure on the throat that never ended. That is why Luresa is always described as female-shaped and incomplete, as if the last breath was stolen and never returned. From behind, every culture paints her as beautiful, soft-stepping, straight-haired, with a narrow, pale neck that seems almost too perfect in dim light. She is said to stand where light is tired, parking lots, late hallways, the side doors of closing bars, places that feel private without being safe. She never waves anyone over, never speaks first, because the stories agree she must be approached, like bait that cannot move. The trap is described as moral, not physical. She appears only when a man approaches with hunger, not when someone passes with respect. Survivors, when any are mentioned, are said to share one sentence: when she turned, they knew that thing had never been allowed a final breath. From the front, people describe her face as unnaturally long, the lower jaw slack, like it slipped loose, and the mouth unable to seal. The eyes are always described as to open, like a body still starving for oxygen, and that detail makes listeners swallow without meaning to. The neck carries a permanent hollow, a bruise-like indentation that never heals, as if the invisible hand never finished releasing. People fear her because she does not need strength to win. She needs only a man's decision to step close enough to be counted. In some tellings, she represents unpunished violence, but in all tellings, she represents the moment desire becomes a weapon turned inward. One culture says she stands near mirrors and reflective glass, because vanity draws the gaze first, and the gaze is how the trap begins. Another says she favors stairwells and service corridors, because those places feel like shortcuts, and shortcuts are where restraint collapses fast. A third says she appears at the edge of music, where the last song fades, because the end of noise makes people believe they are unseen. Across these versions, the shared core is simple. She is not a seductress, only a still invitation created by the watcher's mind. People say Luresa does not punish kindness, because kindness does not close distance. It keeps a respectful space that the legend cannot cross. That is why the oldest advice is never about weapons or prayers, but about posture, eyes, and the discipline of leaving first. In old European towns, the warning was taught like manners. Do not approach a lone woman after midnight, and do not speak with hunger in your voice. They said if you must pass, you pass without slowing, because slowing is the first confession, and confession is what the legend feeds on. Along coastal East Asia, elders supposedly advised a respectful greeting, then immediate departure, because politeness closes the story before it can begin. The same places also taught a second rule: Never touch her shoulder. Never tap to get attention, because touch is the accepted invitation. In parts of the Americas, the warning became blunt. If desire pulls your feet forward, turn back, because your next step is the only ritual she needs. What connects these cultures is how little they promise protection. They promise only a choice, and they insist the first choice decides everything. Those who obeyed said nothing happened, not even fear, while those who disobeyed were later spoken of in careful sentences that ended quickly. Some families taught boys to keep their eyes down in weak light, because looking too long is how the mind begins to invent permission. Others taught men to keep their hands visible and empty, because hidden hands suggest hidden intent, and intent is what Luresa recognizes first. In all places, the most repeated instruction is the quietest. Do not try to confirm, do not try to prove, because proof requires you to step closer. That is why Luresa survives as a legend. The rule protects the careful, and the careless keep the story supplied with consequences. In the late 1960s, people whispered of a man found dead near a dim train corridor, with only throat bruising and no witness willing to describe a woman. A rumor from the early 1970s describes a closing bar where a man stepped outside, smiling, then was later found lifeless behind the building. People said there were no broken things, no scattered clothing, no chase marks. Only that same hand-shaped bruising that looked wrong in size. In the late 1970s, a parking structure gained a quiet reputation after several similar deaths, and drivers began avoiding certain levels after midnight. In the early 1980s, stories from South America mentioned men found lifeless with identical throat marks, and the same detail. Someone had seen a woman from behind. In Eastern Europe, fragmented records were said to list suffocation without explanation, and families avoided describing the last place the men were seen. People comparing these stories noticed the same pattern. Weak light, a back-turned woman, a man stepping too close, then a death with no visible struggle. What terrified them was not the mystery, but the consistency, as if the legend was a mechanism that worked the same way wherever it was fed. By the 1990s, the stories grew shorter. People avoided writing the name, and the warning was passed mouth to ear, never on paper. In the 2000s, some neighborhoods treated certain corners like hazards, not because they believed fully, but because belief was less risky than curiosity. People said the cases never became public patterns, because patterns invite questions, and questions invite someone to test the warning. That is why the legend stays half-hidden, not erased, not proven, only carried by those who would rather leave than learn. Even the survivor lines are rare, because speaking too clearly feels like inviting the memory to become interested in you. So, the stories rely on absence. The missing men, the untouched scenes, the weak lights, and that single back that looks safe until it turns. People say Luresa has not vanished in modern times, only thinned out, because the world grew brighter, and weak light became rarer. Yet they insist she does not follow time, only behavior, and behavior repeats whenever someone thinks a woman alone must be for him. The safest truth stays unchanged. If you never see her face, you were never meant to complete the memory she carries in her throat. But if you remember a back-turned woman under weak light and the air felt wrong, ask yourself what made you want to close the distance. People say these warnings only work when shared, because silence is where Luresa listens best, and listening is how legends stay warm. If you carry a version from your family, your city, or your late-night job, they say to leave it in the comments, so others recognize the signs. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next warning.